This video is brought to you by Captivating History. Top Gun is a visually spectacular blockbuster film released to the general public in May 1986. The movie depicts the fictional tale of U.S. Navy pilot Lieutenant Pete Maverick Mitchell and his efforts to excel at the Top Gun program for elite fighter pilots. Like all fictional movies, Top Gun reflects the socio-political climate of its time. The film was released at the zenith of a hyper-patriotic period in American history. President Ronald Reagan had been reelected in November 1984 while losing a single state to Democratic candidate Walter Mondale. It was the most lopsided election campaign in almost 50 years, as Mondale managed to win only a single state. The secret of Reagan's popularity was simple. He embodied a refreshing return to patriotism after years of political malaise, starting with the Vietnam War and through to the Carter administration's failed attempts to rescue the hostages in Iraq. Reagan successfully portrayed himself as the antidote to American decline. His 1984 electoral campaign declared, "It's morning in America again." This message was aided by the booming stock market and rising living standards, which was embodied by the ascending yuppie class. That element of the Reagan Revolution was reflected and criticized in movies such as Wall Street and Trading Places. The other side of the Reagan message was an in-your-face nationalism. The president had been elected on a hard-line anti-Soviet ticket and insisted, at least in the early years of his administration, that the U.S. would roll back and oppose communism globally. In those years, in reality, the United States avoided costly military entanglements in the fight against communism and other enemies. Instead, Reagan preferred showy demonstrations of force, which did not unduly risk American lives. The primary example of this approach is the U.S. invasion of Grenada in 1983. The USSR supported the tiny island government, but had an army of 1,200, which was quickly overcome with 19 American military fatalities. Instead of direct warfare, the Reagan administration preferred to fund proxies. How does all this relate to Top Gun? Remember that Ronald Reagan was a successful Hollywood actor in the 1950s and governor of California before taking the highest office in the land. He was no stranger to the magic of Hollywood. Indeed, there was more bloodshed in the Cold War depiction movies of the 1980s than through direct fighting between the United States and the Soviet Union. The nonsensically titled Rambo: First Blood Part 2 was followed by Rambo 3. These movies saw Sylvester Stallone slaughter entire units of the Red Army and their allies single-handedly. Rocky IV shows Stallone defeating evil and soulless Soviet boxer named Ivan Drago. Not coincidentally, it was the most successful movie in that massively popular franchise. Top Gun fits into this trend perfectly. In the movie, our hero Maverick and his partner Goose take off from the USS Enterprise carrier to engage with two Soviet MiG-28s. He gets a missile lock on one, but instead of going in for the kill, he saves his colleagues in another plane. When the hero arrives at the Top Gun training program, he focuses on competing with his rival Tom Iceman Kazansky for the Top Gun trophy. However, the movie concludes with another engagement with the Soviet Air Force. Maverick and Iceman both cooperate to take on 6 enemy MiG-28s. The two American pilots unite to defeat the enemy force as the hero takes down 3 Soviet planes single-handedly. Iceman also downs an aircraft before the remaining hostile force scampers off to their respective communist sanctuaries. The two former rival pilots, bonded by blood, now have a shared respect for each other. The movie also has a chosen martyr for the American cause of freedom and capitalism. While competing for the Top Gun trophy, Iceman and Maverick perform dangerous maneuvers, forcing the latter and his partner Goose to eject. However, Goose does not survive. The message of the scene, and the entire movie, is clear. Instead of fighting with each other over trifles and self-aggrandizement, Americans should unite to fight a common enemy. In tune with the movie's message, the producers went further than most in working hand-in-hand with the military. Other contemporary films, such as War Games and Heartbreak Ridge, did not make enough concessions to receive military approval, but Top Gun did. In return, the Navy allowed the filmmakers access to military equipment and personnel for a paltry $1.8 million. Both sides got what they wanted. The movie had realistic effects and did not need to create sets and aircraft at massive expense. Meanwhile, the U.S. Navy got the best commercial it could imagine. The media at the time did not fail to notice that Top Gun served to exaggerate American militarism. The title of a contemporary article in Time magazine says it all. The Pentagon goes Hollywood. Filmmakers and the military enjoy a profitable partnership. It was a glorious recruitment tool for the U.S. Navy. As the article notes, its glorified portrayal of Navy life spurred theater owners in such cities as Los Angeles and Detroit to ask the Navy to set up recruiting exhibits outside cinemas where Top Gun was playing to sign up the young moviegoers intoxicated by the Hollywood fantasy. Quantifiable data backs this observation up. In 1987, recruitment was far higher than it had been when the movie came out. The armed forces enjoyed 20,000 more enlistments than the previous year. Of those, 16,000 went to the Navy. The influence of the film was unmistakable. The symbiotic alliance between Hollywood and what Dwight Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex has never been more evident. So, what is the origin story of this patriotic tale? There is an urban myth that Top Gun is a real-life story. However, that is not strictly true. There are, however, some factually based elements to the picture. The program is very real. The United States Navy Strike Fighter Tactics Instructor Program was established in 1969 in San Diego, California. At the time, the United States was engaged in a massive campaign of bombardment against North Vietnam. To the shock of the armed forces, these sorties had resulted in the loss of hundreds of aircraft, particularly during Operation Rolling Thunder, which lasted from 1965 to 1968. In January 1969, a U.S. Navy report concluded that the main problem regarded the training of aircraft personnel. It had been years since the U.S. had been involved in fierce aerial combat, and the institutional expertise it had gained in World War II was antiquated and increasingly irrelevant. The Top Gun program was designed to restore dogfighting capabilities to American aircrews, or as the Navy put it, to train fighter aircrews at the graduate level in all aspects of fighter weapon systems, including tactics, techniques, procedures, and doctrine. Additionally, it serves to build a nucleus of eminently knowledgeable fighter crews to construct, guide, and enhance weapons training cycles and subsequent aircrew performance. The main threat to U.S. planes was the MiG-21 and MiG-17s operated by the North Vietnamese. Until then, U.S. pilots had trained against other American planes. But Top Gun trainees worked against aircraft designed to replicate the behaviors of MiGs, which were radically different in capabilities and design. Therefore, the operators of the program pioneered dissimilar air combat training. The Top Gun program was an incredible success. By the early 1970s, most U.S. Navy squadrons had at least one graduate of the program. While during Operation Rolling Thunder, the U.S. Navy kill ratio was 2.5 enemy planes for each loss of aircraft. When the bombing was resumed, the ratio was up to 12.5 North Vietnamese planes destroyed for each Navy aircraft. The excellence of Top Gun graduates was one of the main factors in this remarkable reversal of fortunes. Though these events took place during the Vietnam War, no one made any movies about the Top Gun program at the time. The vast majority of movies about that war reflect the deep doubt and angst that accompanied that forlorn conflict. Movies portrayed the senseless death of young Americans and portrayed war crimes committed against the population. The Deer Hunter and Apocalypse Now are paradigmatic of the treatment of war in the cinema during this period. So how did this patriotic Vietnam War-era story end up as a major motion picture release? In 1983, Israeli-born journalist Ehud Yonah published an essay in California magazine titled Top Guns. The journalist got to fly with a two-person crew of Top Gun trainees. The pilot was nicknamed Yogi, while his backseat partner answered to Possum. The two provided endlessly quotable moments and clearly made an immense impression on the journalist. For example, Yogi said, "There's some fear every time you're in the air, mixed with excitement and thrill and tension. But a night carrier landing is the only thing that is sheer, unmitigated terror." In another instance before a flight, he announced, "It's Miller time," in reference to the Miller beer commercial that was popular at the time. But the inspiration for the movie was not any individual, as evocative as some of the Top Gun trainees were. Instead, it was the atmosphere. The high-flying and daring patriotic endeavors of these men suited the atmosphere of Reagan-era patriotism. Although none of the male characters in the movie are directly based on a real person, the female lead is. Actress Kelly McGillis was hired to play Maverick's love interest. At first, the scriptwriters envisioned the character as a typically highly sexualized female nonentity. However, to her credit, McGillis insisted that the character have depth and be portrayed as a three-dimensional and capable person. The actress and the studio agreed to base her character on Christine Fox, a civilian engineer at Marine Corps Air Station Miramar, where the Top Gun program was located. Fox went on to an awe-inspiring career and became the highest-ranked woman in Pentagon history when President Barack Obama appointed her as Deputy Secretary of Defense in 2013. Both Fox and McGillis did their best to keep the character realistic and substantive. However, they did not always succeed. Fox said of her participation in the movie, "The truth is, I had no choice in it and wasn't thrilled." She also noted that McGillis tried to get the filmmakers to dress more professionally, but they insisted on putting her in unrealistically sexualized clothing. Nonetheless, critics noticed the surprising depth of the female lead. The film critic noted that the actress was the highlight of the movie. As she wrote, "When McGillis is off-screen, the movie is a shiny homoerotic commercial. The pilots strut around the locker room, towels hanging precariously from their waists. It's as if masculinity has been redefined as how a young man looks with his clothes half off, and as if narcissism is what being a warrior is all about." The movie hit a vein in the zeitgeist of the mid-80s. It became the top-grossing film of 1986, easily beating out the competition. The movie brought in over $170 million domestically. It was also an excellent tool of international propaganda, smashing box offices globally and raking in over $350 million worldwide. Interestingly, Top Gun served simultaneously as propaganda for the Pentagon and as a signpost in developing more substantial roles for female actresses. However, isn't that duality of militarism, capitalism, and halting progress at the heart of American identity? A remake of Top Gun is slated for 2022, titled Top Gun Maverick. It is unclear how the movie will deal with issues of militarism. The reassertion of American exceptionalism, which typified the 1980s, is now long gone. The country is caught between the increased isolationism of the Republican Party and a ubiquitous anti-war sentiment amongst Democrats. The withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan after a seemingly pointless 20-year war will also undermine the appeal of 21st century militarism. Whatever path director Joseph Kazansky takes in the new release will reflect a country that has changed dramatically. America is now wiser, more cynical, and more diverse than the one that allowed Maverick and Goose to take its breath away in 1986. We hope you enjoyed this video on the real military history of Top Gun. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this. Also, grab your free mythology bundle ebook while it's still available. The link is in the description.